No, the reason people give a fuck about it is because it's on social media, right? And the reason so much money is like independent money, private money, is flowing to those people is because of social media, right? So again, we got to avoid throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
I 100% agree with you. I guess my problem is I don't really feel like I'm really advocating for throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I 100% agree that there are big benefits to social media, but I just feel like when it comes to specifically this issue of remote work, that the negatives outweigh the benefits at this particular point in time. I'm not saying you need to eschew remote work entirely or entirely. I'm for a hybrid model. I'm not saying that we couldn't eventually do this. But it's just when you talk, and I guess when you talk about news generally, it is news generally, but specifically news on social media that's doing it. Social media is enabling and massively amplifying this problem. If it wasn't for social media, things like doom scrolling or clickbait headlines would not exist anywhere to the same extent that they do now. So yes, it's news generally, but news generally is happening on social media.
If it wasn't for social media, people who are interested in the news would just watch it like on channel 11 or whatever the fuck you have, and they'd get the same kind of crazy headlines.
No,
Yeah,
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, we saw with the whistleblower, the lady that came from Facebook and testified before Congress, and she said basically Zuckerberg was running the algorithm to promote hate, and Trump got elected, type of thing. So he shifted the algorithm, he shut it off. Biden got elected, and then he turned it back on again. So you could fix the problem with the social media on the corporate side with that type of thing, but you also have to deal with the personal side. You know, parents got to raise their children well along those types of things too. And I think Wick had an excellent point of that we do need social interaction face to face. Whether that happens in the office or out of the office is like a preference type of thing. And we've got to put some more things into work around that so that we're not arguing over whether we need to get our socializing in the office or not, but that it can actually get done instead.
If we could do that, I'd be 100% in favor. It just doesn't seem like anyone has any really good solutions that we can do right now as to address these massive problems of sort of degenerating friend groups or spikes in mental illnesses.
One of the things that we could do, just quickly, one of the things that we can do is we're doing right here is we're talking about it more cohesively, or we're having more discussion about it, which involves more people and more people want to be a part of it. And that helps shift the social norms or the social acceptance of people being able to ask for help openly and not be criticized for it, or to actually seek help that's not seen as you being broken type of thing. Sorry, please go on.
So do you think that if people so prior to like COVID especially, right? Do you think that there was like less doom scrolling and less people going to YouTube and shit and Facebook for their news? Because I feel like, you know, prior to the whole work from home thing being something that lots of people were doing, this was still a thing people did, right? Even with the forced social interaction in the workplace. So I don't see why you're focusing on that when it doesn't seem like there was ever a solution to that problem if it even exists.
Enjoy yourself. I'm glad
I don't think that preventing remote work is a solution to the problem. I think that it prevents the problem from getting worse.
Okay. How?
Because I think that if you eschew any sort of if you massively shift people away from physical work to remote work, that it just makes the problem worse. I think that this would be make the problem.
Yeah, you're repeated the thing you said that I asked you how. So like, how does it? Okay, like how does it make it worse? Right? Because I think in there you're there's the assumption that people who aren't getting social interaction from the workplace aren't going to seek it in other ways, right? And I mean in person in other ways, right? As if like most people have just their coworkers that they socialize with. And
I think that it seems to be that people are increasingly not pursuing socialization, irregardless of whether it's in the workplace or not. So I think any area where we can increase in-person socialization is very important. That's not to say that there aren't some people who will use this free time to socialize. But I think there are people, I think there are undeniably
Could we agree that it's a vast majority of people who would use a free time to socialize in person?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Where do you get that? Like, what indicates that to you? What indicates to you that the vast majority of people are not having in-person social interaction?
not that they aren't having any in-person social interactions, but that people are having less and they are pursuing them less. And I would point to all of the I know that they, and I know we don't want to fling studies back and forth with each other, but I think there are a lot of studies that talk about how people are having less friends, less romantic partners, less involved contacts, even less like associates, people that they would say like, oh, I'm not friends with them, but I know this person. It seems that people are increasingly using online platforms to avoid going in person, whether that's staying on Discord all day or using Uber Eats and never go to a restaurant and things like this. This just feels like almost undeniable. If we disagree on this, I don't think there's any way to move forward because we're just having a fundamental disagreement about
I gotta go, gang. I'll see you guys later.
I don't understand what the problem is with that.
Take care, Wick. See
So
you.
what? Maybe people are more confident in understanding themselves and are more comfortable with themselves than they've been in the past. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it is a good thing that you're comfortable enough with yourself that you don't need to seek out social interaction from others. Like, why do we always view this as a negative? You know,
Usually because if you're
solitude
not-
can be good for people, you know?
Well, usually
people
because
with
what we-
socialization are usually a minority in the population. Most people want to congregate and socialize.
Well,
There's a
not
reason
that
why
not,
solitary confinement is used as a punishment.
Listen, not that there isn't a time and a place or that people shouldn't at some point seek to socialize, but because there's a degradation in people's need or desire to socialize does not mean that there's functionally an issue here, right? Like, because what we have to say
No,
is,
it
well,
does.
hold on though. Hold on. Does it? Or have we been too reliant
does.
on others? And are we at a place where we
No.
are more comfortable with who we are as individuals that we don't necessarily always have to rely on others to validate ourselves? Because that's what we're doing when we socialize.
We are literally, at this point in human history, the most intertwined people that have ever existed. So the idea of like solitude bringing us, making us more efficient is factually wrong based upon like how we are cooperating as of right now, right? In between like national trade between nations, in between cooperation between nations,
That
becomes
has
vastly
nothing to
important
do
that
with
you
your mental health. You're talking about institutions. Sure, that works as on an institutional level. Of course it does.
Which then,
The
when we
mechanisms
go
of society,
into,
sure.
which
But
when, then
we're
when we
individuals,
go
we
into
don't
how
necessarily
we
need
are
that.
working within our families to create tight knit social environments, not only just within families but your friends too. Doesn't mean that you have to have 24 friends. What we want to try and ensure is that you have 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 actually solid people that you can feel that you can rely on. I don't
For
necessarily.
you, Red, yes, for you, definitely, I can see that as being important. But for Longbeard over there, he's saying he wants to be a bit more autonomous with how things work and so forth. And that seems to be a smaller portion of the population.
Right, of
So
course.
You're talking two different needs there as well, too. So
Well,
I just wanna
yeah.
We're
point that
talking
out
like a
to you.
drum.
Yeah,
we're
but the
talking
reason
like a
why it
dramatic-
becomes
we're talking about
important-
like 5% or so.
The reason why, the reason why it becomes important is because then you have to exercise, those people still have to exercise within themselves, within the community, a community. And this, in my case that I'm trying to point out is like usually governance, right? Like if you're a highly individualistic individual, that's fine. There's not going to be a ton of you out there, but it can become problematic when we talk about, coming together on some big social issues or coming together in moments of crisis.
I'm a socialist,
That's
by
why
the
it
way.
becomes
I
important.
want to be clear about that. I'm very much in the socialist fucking ideology. So it's not that I negate the need for us to come together on things. I just don't think that we necessarily have to do it IRL. I think there's other avenues in which we can pursue those same interactions that don't necessarily involve traditional ways that we've done it in the past. And I think currently, so I come from a tech background. I work in tech and I do pretty well for myself. I work from home and I am totally content with that. As far as social interaction goes, of course I still have that. But my social interaction then becomes on my terms, not on the terms of a business or a school or somebody else. I get to decide what my social interaction level is going to be. I get to make those decisions. And can we say that maybe when people are left to their own to make those decisions, that sometimes some groups are going to make those decisions less than others? And maybe that's part of the reason that we see a downtick in people wanting to socialize with others, because they don't have to.
I just gotta say, I'm gonna dip out. It was great talking to you guys. I'll see you all
Have a
later.
good one,
Okay?
Brento.
See ya.
Take care. See you later.
Yeah, and again, I think that kind of speaks to the point of like you want to make sure that those are of value, right? Like you brought up the point of like a lot of the things of like our social groups at work, at in-person work, seem a lot forced, or it can have a lot of negative effects for the business when you deal with that contention that can become like hyper focused or very toxic, right? So it looks like, at least from what I've been trying to advocate for, is it looks like if you limit those interactions to like strictly work and some side conversation if they enjoy one another on an individualistic level, I don't believe that they are not going to then, outside of their job, seek out people because they are trapped at home with their job. I feel like, to me, it feels natural to then want to get out of the house to interact with people, right? But the contention is like, we seem to be a highly isolistic kind of group as of now, how we're interacting with social media. So how do we know what may feel natural to me is necessarily what's going to happen? I say that it feels natural, therefore it will happen. Others are saying, well, we have this huge kind of like huge fucking like species changing device, aka social media. If we all agree that those more interpersonal real life situations are like better, those friendships are better, is it necessarily the fact that those are going to get established more because of social media? It may look like people feed into this machine more than actually valuing those. I would say that I don't think that would be the case. It feels more natural, but there seems to be like an argument, and there's some data to back it up.
That's wrong.
I don't think also when it comes to work environments, like forcing people into what could possibly be a toxic work environment as a means of creating a social interaction is necessarily a good thing. I mean, speaking from like experience, like where I work and whatnot, like I work with about 40 people. 5 of them I get along with pretty well. 2 of them I actually enjoy interacting with. The majority of them, not really. As a matter of fact, even like today, what is it? The 2 people that I normally interact with the most, they weren't there today. No one basically spoke to me all day. I was just literally in the room, but nobody spoke to me. I don't necessarily consider that a good social interaction for spending a long period of time at work in a social environment, and I didn't get anything out of the social experience from that. So I don't necessarily see work as a means of it could possibly be a means, but it's not necessarily the only means that we should be forcing people into to force social interactions.
I agree with that.
Gooby, you asked a question a while ago to Wick, and Wick kind of like pushed past it, unfortunately. I don't remember what it was. I think it was about like mental, basically about how we should accommodate people. Do you remember what that question was? It was something interesting to touch on it.
I should accommodate people.
Whether we shouldn't accommodate, or where these social habits come from, or something like that. Do you remember what that was?
Where is the loneliness coming from?
So, because a lot of what I think Wick was saying, and I think some of what Flow Trace is saying, is that people will not socialize on their own. A lot of people are choosing not to do this. So forcing them to do it through the workplace, right, is beneficial. It's better than no social interaction at all. Right. So what I was asking is, where do you think that comes from? Right. So where does this desire not to socialize that you guys think people have? Where do you think that comes from?
I think a big part of it. Or sorry, go ahead, Desperate.
When I was saying in the beginning, I think people have gotten used since basically the age of the internet to being extremely candid online, and that candid nature in people, like in front of like on this panel or whatnot, and how we interact with people on social media and whatnot. That candid nature that we have there, we can't necessarily have that same exact candid nature in real life, in like a face-to-face communication with people. And I think people prefer that more than trying to and more than running the risk of making trouble, in essence, for themselves in those social interactions in real life. Because I would say that like if Doobie and I were to meet up and have a conversation, I don't think our conversation would be anywhere near the kind of conversation we'd have on this panel.
I don't think we'd be talking very much at all, especially
Right.
after I got a couple glasses of wine into you.
Right.
I think that social media is very akin to a drug, and people want to do it even though it's not good for them, and this starts to subsume other parts of their life. I think that it's very addictive, it's very toxic, and when people have an avenue in their life that's very addictive but toxic, they will start to sort of give up other avenues of their life to pursue that one because it is addictive. I think that's one of the big ones, but not the only.
Yeah, but like I just don't. If that is the case, then I don't know what society does in response.
Me too.
Like, if social media is all those things, right? But also before that, people complained about video games, right? But like before this was video games, and before that, well, I don't know,
Movies, music,
movies, music,
Music.
you know,
or comic books, right? It's like this great social ill. It seems like it requires an adjustment, right? Like if it's the case, then it seems like it only requires an adjustment, and then society is fine. It seems like the people who have difficulty socializing will gravitate to the things that allow them to not deal with issues face to face, right? Like those will always be people like that, and they'll move to those. And they're not the only people who get involved in these things, obviously, right? People who love social media, people who love video games or whatnot, right? There's a wide range of people who do that, but it seems like endemic that we will have a class of individuals who will shun like traditional relationships, right, and look for other mediums to interface with people. And I think overall, it's a good thing. I feel like right now we're becoming those parents, right? Who what was that guy's name? Jack, not Dorsey. Jack. He was a lawyer who was trying to like ban video games. Jack.
Jack Dempsey.
Not Dempsey. Jack.
Jack Dempsey.
I
Dempsey's
know.
a boxer
Yeah.
from the 1900s.
It's Jack. Someone's gonna know who I'm talking about. In any case, like I feel like we're like like those people.
Jack
who get-
Thompson. I did the
Thompson,
Googling.
thank
That
you.
dude, yeah.
Jack Thompson,
Thank you,
thank you so
God.
much. Yes. I think we are like that at this moment. If we're saying, well, social media is so bad, it's social ill, and something needs to be done. Doobie, Dustin, Poetries.
Yeah, so I think that just kind of because I think maybe I can definitely relate with what I'm about to say, of course, because I experienced it, but I'm sure lots of you can too, right? If you're not really feeling into social interaction, but you were kind of forced to be at a party anyway because you told your friends you'd be there, whatever the fuck. So you're kind of lurking in the corner, avoiding people, sort of cradling your beer and waiting until you have an excuse to get the fuck out of there, right? I think the kind of people that you're talking about, Prime, that's how they are in the workplace, right? They don't actually want to socialize there. They keep to themselves, right? They do the work, they keep their head down, and then they go the fuck home when they go home when they can, and they get on Discord and they play video games, right? Because they don't want to fucking socialize in the workplace. Fuck that, right? It's not for them, and I think that's totally fine, right? If I like this saying that, hey, how do we accommodate these people? I think we are, right? I think things like Discord accommodate those people because if they'd rather have the social interaction online, I think that's okay for some people. I think that's fine. And if they get to the point where, hey, I haven't interacted with a human being in like 2 months, then they can cross that bridge and they can go out and find something to do in the real world, right? Like and I think lots of them do. I don't know if there's anything really gained from like forcing those people who are just like introverted a lot of the time out of their shells, quote unquote, right? Forcing them to be something that they don't want to be because it's more in line with what you think people should behave like.
I tend to agree with you, and mostly because having to work in a professional environment and then go out and sing and try to make my way in a metal band, which I did for 13 years. Like, I don't want everybody that I work with necessarily jumping into what I'm doing with my band, right? Because maybe some of the shit I'm doing with my band is objectionable to them. So when I go to work, like, my work is not my place for where I want that social interaction. I have another avenue for that. My avenue is not through work because, well, number one, I was taught from when I was very young, don't dip your pen in the company ink. So I'm not looking to date anybody at work. And number two, like, why would I want to go drink with a bunch of people from work who could turn around and use that against me at work? You know, like, there's a lot of reasons, like, why I wouldn't want to socialize at work, especially at work, because I don't want these motherfuckers knowing anything about me. Go ahead and look. I live in a right to work state, man. They can fire me for any fucking reason they want. Like, I don't want them knowing shit about me. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to go and do my job and collect my paycheck, and I'm going to go home and party the fuck out with all my friends and have barbecues and do the shit that I do with the people that I love and care about. Like, and those are people that aren't at my fucking job. That's for fucking damn sure. Maybe I might pick up a friend there. Maybe there's somebody that I'll end up having a common interest. Maybe they have a flyer on their desk or they mention a movie or something like that. And we end up having that conversation. There's an organic friendship that builds, but that's very few and far between. And I think a lot of people feel that same way, especially like, I mean, in, you know, in my situation, having been a single parent for so long, I don't want a whole lot of people interacting in my life. Like, I need to be very selective about who comes in my door and shit. And maybe the reason that I'm not wanting to socialize at work has nothing to do with me being an antisocial person, but has everything to do with me wanting to protect and maintain my income.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's go Dustin Flowtrace.
Kind of just like two things. I think we're all in agreement that we're intensely, social creatures, and one of the things that we've done to like work with this is the fact that we created governments, right? Well, this seems a little bit weird because we've created this giant social experiment, but now it's kind of like controlled by 1 to 2 different companies, right? Like, you have this giant wealth of society. And by wealth, I mean just like a bunch of people, not necessarily like wealth that they are generating. But like, you have this giant wealth of society, and now we as gamers, we understand like how to navigate, or we have understood how to navigate, not always in the correct way, but we get this idea of like there are different ways that you interact within this sort of group, right? Like League of Legends players have different modicums of interactions than, Dota players, or vice versa, right? So we have all these unique tribes that are able to interact or compete against one another for those interests, but you still see a want and a need for that social interaction on something that is incredibly fucking new and very unfounded and very it's starting to get some guardrails, but we can talk about whether or not those seem efficient. Doesn't look like they are. But the second part, what really worries me about people that are very apprehensive on the like, well, hold on, we just need to throw the brakes on this working from home stuff. There are going to be social consequences that we may not know. The problem is, at least for America, we work in a very capitalist nation, and it's important to remember that capital, if they see this happening and they agree that this is going to be a huge moneymaker, they're going to do what they can to maximize it within the realms of the law. So if you're one of the people that's just saying, no, wait, hold on, it's not, no, wait, hold on. It needs to be like, let's figure out how we can make this work, right? Let's make sure that companies aren't able to like break into your computer systems, aren't forcing you to sit in front of a camera so they can verify where tracking your eyes on your monitors, right? Like, it's important to get these regulations and these worker rights in place before, a normal social work culture becomes a normal abusive social work culture becomes a corporate standard. I think that's what worries me, that if you don't recognize how out of hand this can get and you're just saying we need to pump the brakes, that's not necessarily what's going to happen.
Like what, Play Trace?
Yeah, I think we're coming pretty close to looping on this topic, but I guess I can just sort of respond to a couple specific points. I do think there are some people that will always be antisocial, Doobie and Prime. You're absolutely correct that there's always going to be some people. But of all the people that are currently antisocial right now, it's not the case that like 98% of the people who are currently antisocial are these permanently antisocial types. I think if anything, it's the opposite, where I think there's a big chunk of people in society that are not antisocial because of who they are, but because we live in a society right now that seems to be exacerbating antisocial tendencies. There is no doubt that there are some people that can work with this, that can work, who can make remote work for them, who would be net benefited in the net by being able to work remotely, and if in fact would probably be affected in the net negative if we force them to socialize at work. But I'm okay with that, because it's my belief that there are far more people who will be effective in a net positive by forcing them not to either use a hybrid model and still come to the office at some point and get that socialization. If it was the case that we could have people socialize outside of work, I'd be fine with that. But the problem is that this is not what is currently happening. There are a lot of people who are not socializing outside of work, and work is some of the only socialization they get. And it's bad socialization. I agree with all of that. But the problem is that I would much rather have them get some of that bad socialization at their work than just throw that socialization out and have none left at all.
So that would be better if they got bullied at work. If they had the social interaction of getting bullied at work as opposed to no social interaction. Is that what you're saying?
Or
no,
being ignored all day and basically having zero social interaction. You're just with people
not
in the
necessarily.
same
I
room.
think there are going to be individual cases
Because there is a social interaction of ignorance.
There are going to be some cases where it's going to be a net negative, that social interaction. But we don't legislate or talk about societal change off of individual cases. What we talk about is what is going to happen to most people. And it is my belief that most people would benefit from socializing at work versus doing fully remote work and not doing that. We can talk about that.
What about people with families? Don't you think that working at home has actually brought families closer together because they can spend more time together?
Some people are going to benefit more from remote work. Yes.
Well, I mean, the preponderance of the country are people who in some way have families, whether that's have children of their own or are children or live with family members who they have close ties to. Like,
I don't think that's the case of the preponderance of the country for people that are working in offices where they're going to be remotely working necessarily. I don't know if that's the case. I'd be surprised if anybody has that stat
off here,
offhand.
so I will talk to you.
Have a good one, Desperado.
Bye-bye.
Take care. I mean, but you recognize that there is a large populace of people that live with family and have seen a net positive because of their ability to interact.
Yes, there's a large populace of almost everything in a country of 300 million. My question is the percentages. Am I going to help more people than hurt by doing this? If yes, then I'll do it.
Well, don't you think it's the company's decisions to decide that anyways?
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I'm not talking about... I'm saying this is what companies should do and what I hope they do. I'm not all advocating for legally banning remote work or anything like that. Absolutely.
But do you think that... I mean, obviously, not every business model is going to fit the same, right? I mean, especially if you're working...
Of course. I'm sure there, in a country of 300 million, there's going to be some businesses where actually my argument falls apart. But I think for most businesses, most people are going to be benefited. Yes.
Do you know that a lot of businesses do like Zoom happy hours and stuff like that and have social interactions through video conference and things like that?
Yes, but I don't think that comes anywhere close to the social. I don't.
That
think
sounds
that
worse than going to a bar for me. Even on like the worst days I'm having, that sounds decidedly worse.
All my coworkers are literally all the way across the country from me. Literally as far across the country from me as they could possibly fucking get. And I have had so much fun in happy hours getting trashed with them on Zoom. I can't tell you. Like. We awesome. Fucking have a fucking blast. So it does happen. It very much does happen.
Yeah, I agree. It does happen.
I think
I'm not concerned with whether or not.
I think there's a misconception that because everybody's working from home, that just nobody ever wants to get out, or nobody wants to have interactions with their coworkers. Like I said, I typically wouldn't have done that if I were going into the office. I wouldn't have done that happy hour with them. I laid out quite clearly why I wouldn't have done that. But because we're in a virtual environment, it's very controlled. I can fucking close out that meeting when I'm done and be done with it. And you know what? Why is that a bad thing? Like, you can have that tactile interaction as much as you want.
I'm going to have to repeat myself. I agree that there are going to be cases where remote work actually is good. I'm for a hybrid model. I'm for specific people, like those that are chronically ill or disabled, being able to do remote work. But my concern is not that there are some cases where remote work is good. My concern is that there are more remote cases where remote work is bad.
I'll say it. I'll say it. We need the data. I mean, we need data to like back that type of thing up. I mean, if it's just a gut feeling, that's fine. I'm not arguing that. But like,
Yeah, well,
we would need some evidence for that, wouldn't we?
I yes, I think that there is evidence. I don't think that it's a good idea to like try and dive into studies in front of a panel. Frankly, I'm kind of surprised that people disagree that there seems to be an increasing degeneration of social circles, particularly with young people, and that seems to be driven by our presence online and social media.
No, as a direct. I mean, as a direct result of like remote work. That's what I was saying. I think that.
Well, I think it goes without
saying.
saying. I think we all agree that it goes without saying. And as Doobie pointed out earlier, that when you are remote working, you're going to have social media or YouTube on another monitor, and you're going to be increasing your online presence. So it seems to
But
just sort
why
of go
isn't
hand in
that
hand.
online presence considered social interaction to you?
Maybe.
It is a kind of social
I
interaction, but it's not
actually,
the good kind.
well, first I'm gonna admit something to you guys. Okay, so I've been speaking this entire time as like from the perspective of healthy doobie, right? A healthy social interaction doobie, right? A mix of online and in real life thing, which is like where I am when I'm healthy, right? But I've had times, and over like COVID especially, where literally like 90% of my interaction with human beings was online, was Discord, right? And just because COVID, so I couldn't go out and hang out with my friends in real life, like my normal friends in real life. We couldn't find shit to do. Then I was actually paranoid about getting COVID, because I had like 3 people in my family die from it. So I didn't want to go to their houses a lot of the time. So I would just I was just at home. I'd play some video games, watch some movies, talk to people on Discord, and that's just my social interaction. And I found that like I'm generally like I guess I'd call myself like an omnivert, right? So like I think I'm like naturally introverted, but when I'm in a social setting, I can become very very extroverted, right? So yeah, I didn't see it as like a big like detriment to me. I think because I'm totally fine being on my own anyway. But I know of people who were in the same place that I was, 90% of the social interaction online, and who was not a healthy thing for, right? And they were stuck, right? And they would have like breakdowns and fucking panic attacks and all that, and all this kind of shit, right? Even if they thought it's what they wanted, they lost perspective, right? And I think it's easy to do when you're like stuck on social media. You lose perspective, and what some jackass in Sweden said about your Twitter comment, right, is like the most important thing in the world to you, right? Like nobody else gives a fuck, right? 10 people saw it, nobody cares, right? But it's like the most important thing to the world. And on Discord, I see it all the time on my Discord server.
Slava Ukraini.
So less people like this on my Discord server who get so fucking wrapped
Aaron
up in like
Gobra.
roles and ranks on the server and the memes that they're allowed to post, and oh god, this guy said this to me, and oh this mod muted me for 2 minutes, and oh my god, it was so unfair. They freak the fuck out, right? It's not healthy all the time. I think you can lose perspective, and you need to have a mix, right? You need to like be aware of where you are mentally when you're engaging with these things.
Go ahead. Finish.
Yeah. So yeah, I think yeah, just I don't want to seem like I'm like totally unaware of like the downsides of some social media if that's all you're doing, right? That being said, I do need to go for a bit. I'll be back later if you guys are still hanging around after the stream. But I need to run off for like 20 minutes.
Thank you, Doobie.
Yeah.
See you
I
later.
think that's. See you,
Bye.
buddy.
Have a good one.
I think that's super interesting. Oh, also, like, Smashville open if you guys want to join. Still, it's an open chat. I'm much like Doobie, in that I'm, I guess, an omnivert. I can do both pretty
Oh, I
easily.
thought you were going to say rich or good looking, but
Neither of those.
We
Clearly
can already
not.
tell that he's good looking.
Subs to the channel if you want to get me rich, right? Sub, get bits or gifts. So if you're enjoying this community, this content, help us out. But I I have a similar outlook, and I was fine. I was and am fine on my own, right? So like I've been on my own for a lot longer than COVID, and I've okay. I don't need that level of interaction. I've been like, I've gotten a lot more socialization from Twitch, right? And still, it's like, it's only so much I get. But even then, when I had even less than that, I was fine. But I recognize other people aren't. I recognize that other people going through the same thing. It is torture for them. Like not having, I like hearing their stories about like not be able to do the same things that they used to, right? Like just being at home and maybe with their partners, maybe not with a partner, right? And that, it eats at them, and I definitely have nothing but sympathy for them. Um, I but that's a temporary state of affairs, one that will be rectified eventually, slowly, as of now. People are going out, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's a separate conversation. But people are going out and getting involved. Um, but it seems to me that part of the problem uh, is that we're mixing two groups, right? There's a group that uh, that is part of this is temporarily inconvenienced by our current state of affairs, right? And then there's another group um, that wants to separate because of like the benefits of remote work and how that would uh, be in their lives, right? How that would work well in their lives. And there's another group that uh, wants to separate permanently, right? It's not that remote work has any advantages. It's not that social media has an overwhelming number of advantages for them. It's just that they kind of don't want to. They kind of don't want to. And I feel like the people who've appeared on this panel and talked about it have all fall somewhere along those groups, maybe others that I haven't named. And then when we're talking about this, we kind of mix them all into one. And it makes it difficult because then someone will say, well, then my experience is different from that. My
That's
experience,
it
like,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So it confuses the conversation, right? So yeah, everyone has a different experience. Everyone has a different perspective that they're looking at this, but there are distinct groups that are suffering or sorry experiencing the same thing, right? Experiencing the same
Sure.
conditions any which way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, um, there are some people where the isolation kills them. I get that. Like, and I agree with you that, like, for some people, COVID was really, really bad for them. People that really depend on that socialization or need that interaction on a regular. There was a point in my life where I was much younger, I probably would have fallen into that. I probably would have had much more issues with that. But I think I've gotten older and like my need for that social interaction has changed a little bit. But yeah. As a matter of fact, I think younger people probably do on a mental wellness level suffer a little more from having to be pulled away from a social situation. And I feel like they lose a little bit of their life in it with what's happening in COVID in general. But I don't think that's necessarily grounded to the workplace. I think that's the lockdowns and everything that's happened, restaurants and clubs and everything closing down, even our ability to go to concerts and festivals and all those kinds of things. So I don't think that it's like a workplace thing as much as it's just been a societal awareness of us needing to take care of our collective health. And through that, unfortunately, the byproduct has been that some people's ability to interact socially where there normally would have been normal growth out of that has been inhibited, but I think that, yeah, like, to your point, there are several different groups that have been affected in different ways. Some people really thrive in this atmosphere, like myself, right now I'm thriving in it, but there's no one fits solution.
You got it exactly, Prime. You understand it very, very well, the dynamics of the conversation happening there. And it's one of the things that I've really had to learn hard how to pay attention to in conversations. And I've come to understand it like the big five personality types as it overlays on like the MBTI personality types. So you've got the introverts and extroverts type of thing going on. And if you've got introverts and extroverts in the same room, and they start arguing over their needs on which needs are right, you're going to have a losing conversation because you got different needs that are being met. And basically, from those studies and from things that we've seen people take those tests and so forth, you've got like 80% of the population that is kind of passive a bit. A true extrovert that goes out and lives and does that is a bit more rare. So yeah, I always try to take that into account when I'm watching the conversations happen.
I just want to ask, like, why it is that, like, I don't see what the division is here so much, because like so many of these jobs that are going remote are jobs that have the ability to go remote, while so many aren't, right? So if you're truly that extroverted and you wanted to go get a job that isn't, if that's your inclination, that could be an option, right? In most fields, right? There's always gonna be some option to have some job in an office or out working in a factory, whatever it is that you're so inclined to do. But I still will go back to, like, if we put everything in a pros and cons sheets, I think that the pros of remote work are so strong that if the only like dramatic con we're seeing is that extrovert people are going to be sad about it and have some issues socializing, then I would say that a remedy needs to be worked up for that, as opposed to just eliminating remote work or eliminating it or something of
Well,
that nature,
here's
because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that we would give up all the benefits.
Well,
Well,
here's part of the problem with that is that if the extroverts tend to be the leaders in our society because they like get shit done and talk and do stuff, so they'll impose their will upon the masses, and then you've got, well, okay, so we have to take care of both sides of it. Even though the extroverts tend to be a smaller portion of the society, they're equally as important as the masses. So when you balance out and work something out between the two groups, then you've got more productivity and people make more money and a lot of people are more happy.
I don't think that's inherently equal. So I think that the people that might be let's just assume that's true. Let's just say all people in leadership positions are extroverted. I'll give you that. I don't care. I think
Yeah,
that, like,
that's fine. It was just a generality. But
I know,
go
but
ahead.
I'm just saying we'll assume that. And I don't have a problem with assuming it. If we go with that, we still have the economics of it, and I have yet to hear any economic ramification for putting people into a physical space, because it like the cost is tremendous. Like the cost of having office space, the cost of having, like, if the company has parking, like just any of these things, it is so expensive and
Yeah.
so unnecessary. Especially so many of these jobs that are remote
Well,
now will require you to have your own computer, your own equipment. Like,
right.
so they're offloading all of that cost. So they don't have
Mhm.
to have the whatever servers on site they might have to have. They don't have to have the computers, the desks, the chairs. They don't have to have a lease in some building. They don't have to have any of that shit. It's all gone. So I think, as extroverted as those people might be, they still are going to see the economic benefit of it. And not to mention, they can widen their pool of hiring talent. You can start hiring people from all across the country, all over the world, if you're so
Right.
inclined to do so. And it just doesn't, like, there's no
Well,
fiscal, like,
Goth,
counter
Goth,
to it.
that was kind of part and parcel of the point that I was trying to address about the importance of regulation. If you want to check the VC chat, that video that I had posted actually goes through. It's a Vice piece, goes through and talks about, the problems that that this one specific town had that ended up starting to alienate and price out citizens that had originally lived there, gone to high school, grew up out of their own neighborhoods, out of their own homes. They can't afford to find, housing in that area now because a bunch of people from, I think the actual place was like New York, came out there to live in that part of like rural-ish Colorado to do their work, and it just causes prices to, like, on housing and everything else, to really skyrocket. Like, there are going to be negative benefits outside of even like how our power infrastructure works. Like, you're going to have to figure out new tax codes, right? Like, you're going to have to figure out, there's going to need to be some a fair amount of legislation that goes into this idea.
I think you're right. I think there's definitely going to be some unintended consequences, but I think that on the business side of it, like, fiscally, it's just going to make sense for the business. I think that's going to be number one.
Yeah, and
And
that's
we live in America,
Yeah.
so that's what's
yeah,
going to take precedence, like,
and
over
that's
everyone else.
And
Yeah,
that's
I
what
I
agree.
don't think
scares
there's,
me
I
so
don't think there's
much.
any points against what you're saying, Goth. The economic position is rock solid. It's just the other part of like keeping more people happy type of stuff. But would it be better generally overall to go to remote work? Yeah, probably.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
but this becomes functional, is what I'm saying. Like downright to function, like how governments operate, how some states don't collect an income tax at all. And if you've got people that are, in there and they are spending money, within that area, yeah, that may be good, but the state may not see a lot of that revenue, or they may not be seeing enough. Right? I talk about a big idea of like how this will decentralize people that go to cities, these large cities, because that's where most of the economic wealth and opportunity is. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be distributed correctly or in an efficient manner, right? Like it becomes very problematic if you don't have that groundwork.
If you're if you're like of this like worker mindset, right? Like you sound very pro worker to me. I I would suggest, right, like wouldn't the ability to hire from all over the place and also the ability to get hired from all over the place be a net positive for worker mobility, which is a huge issue for workers' rights anyways? If you can choose to work in for a company in a space that maybe they have to abide by legislation that the state that you're native to doesn't have to, or your ability to make more money because you work for a company, say out of Florida, even though you live in, say, Oklahoma, where the cost of living is a little bit lower. I mean, this is the ability that we now create when you have a work from home situation like that economically.
Yeah, it could, but again, like what I'm talking about is like some of that legislative infrastructure. Like let's pretend somehow we get past like the actual power issues or like all of those sort of things, which are things that we need to address anyway. So we could say that we knock those out from a legislative point of view. Like I was saying, like some states don't have like actual income tax, right? Like they're not going to be generating the same amount of revenue that they may need to put in some of this infrastructure. Now, I'm a big federal guy, so I can envision an entire national reworking. I don't think that would be a problem necessarily, but there are going to be legislative issues. I think Goth brought it up, or somebody brought it up about like companies starting to like track their workers on their own work computers on like even eye tracking software, right? Like a lot of this sounds and seems a little Minority Report, like future crime or and stuff like that. But like to say that it's not going to be an issue, to say that like somehow we're going to allow people to work at home and they're going to have better worker rights, they may be like able to do things better for their home life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to 100% inherit worker rights that will be vastly better than what they have now. That's what worries me. That if you don't have this groundwork, if you aren't having these conversations with people, or if your legislators don't understand the scope of the problem and how bad it's going to get out of hand, you're going to be behind capital, and that can be abusive.
But people have worked from home for
I'm
well
gonna
over
take
20
off.
years.
Everybody have a good night.
Above and beyond, and before COVID happened. I mean,
Oh yeah, of course.
there's loan officers and people who work in real estate and people who work in all sorts of industries that have worked from home like entirely their whole career for like I said, well over 20 years. I mean, I had friends when I was a kid whose their parents were computer programmers or were responsible for network security that worked from home and were able to manage a lot of that stuff through remote access even back then. So I don't necessarily think that this is something new where there's got to be a whole lot of new infrastructure built. It seems like we've already built it. It seems like it's been there. We've been using it for a long time. It's just there's more people now involved in that than there were previously.
Yeah, and that becomes incredibly important, right? Like we talk about this infrastructure like it's already built. There are areas there are several states that don't have this same infrastructure throughout their entire state, right? It's again this concentration of economic power. That becomes problematic if you want to talk about like spreading the wealth, if you want to talk about like eliminating this concentration of people here and spreading it out more, so you've got a little bit more of like a unifying, codifying like nation. Like there are a lot of issues in in a sense of infrastructure that do and will need to be addressed for capital just to like get ahead of this.
Sure, and I would agree that the expansion needs to happen, but to say that the structures aren't already there, I think is a mistake. I think that the
Well,
structures
I'm not
are
saying
there.
that they're not. I'm saying that
should be
they're concentrated.
Of course, there's
I'm saying
gonna
that they're
need to be
they're
It's going to
concentrated.
need to be expanded. You know, yeah.
Yeah,
I
of
agree
course.
with you on that point.
Yeah.
I think I definitely can relate to what you guys are saying, and especially sort of Dustin's side point here about how, irregardless of what we want to do, this is coming and we got to get ready. And outside of sort of the benefit to workers and businesses, there's a lot of like legislative stuff we need to work on. But I guess it's just the thing I keep fundamentally coming back to is I do agree there are different groups. If I was God and I could like just tell who is remote work going to be healthy for, is going to work for, great, let's let those people remote work. I guess my problem is that I feel like the people who remote work is going to be unhealthy for are going to opt into it, and there's a lot more of those people than the other. I guess the thing that I guess I would sort of end on is that I think, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think that like many other things, COVID did not really create this problem as much as it exacerbated an underlying problem that had been festering for a long time and lurking. And then instead of seeing the problem sort of subside as COVID does, it will only grow. And as it becomes stronger, so too will become more public, and that's something we have to confront and solve. And I really do think that sort of the death of the social fabric, particularly among young people, especially among young men, is something that is not talked about enough, and is something that is really flying under the radar as a major problem for our society. And we are gonna reap the rewards of letting this problem go unsolved if we do.
I don't know. I guess that's like, well, the part that do be pushing back on, the part that I guess I'm pushing back on, that reaping the rewards, right? Like to say that there's going to be some big, I don't see that. I mean, I see that there will be consequences, but for anything, for any social ill, there'll be consequences. It's just that is it enough of a problem that should require a response that should drastically change how we interact with social media or remote work? I guess that's like the focus. Like that's
I would
the
say
question.
that it would warrant allowing disabled and chronically ill people to fully work remotely and let other people do a hybrid model. I don't think that's big. It's that big of an ask.
Oh, it's barely an ask then. I mean, if that's all there is, that like some people should work hybrid. I mean, I guess. But then,
Right on. Well, welcome aboard, Prime.
well,
It just
but
doesn't
that-
seem like much of an argument, is what we're saying, Flo.
Yeah, and also like, and this is what Doobie was getting at before. To an individual, to a business owner, like, like how concerned should you be, right? Like it seems like some will be in a position to offer hybrid working conditions. Others might not, or they may be able to, but the money that they'd have to spend, it's not worth it. Either providing office space or providing the IT infrastructures allowing for remote work, right? And then to ask them, well, do both because that fits people's lives better. It's like, well, if you don't like what I offer as an employer, well, that's fair. I'll find another workplace. That seems to be like the best answer there. Like if I'm an employer,
I do think it is essentially a race to the bottom. I don't think it. I hope companies do this, but I don't think it's going to be the case that companies are going to prioritize sort of the mental health well-being of their employees when it comes to balancing whether or not remote work is good for them. I think Dustin and Jason and Gothgash all right on the money. The businesses are going to make a very harsh calculation that's probably going to come up with something like, holy shit, look at all the expenses we can cut if we let our workers work from home, and then they're just going to cut it all. But I just worry that is going to have a lot of negative externalities. I would hope companies don't use sweatshops, but I don't think we can rely on them to make that decision. Not to say that this is as bad as sweatshops, to be clear.
no, you should say that. No, that should definitely do that. memory and stuff.
But
I don't know. You ever worked in
Be
a
a
call
sharper
center?
little argument. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is going to have a lot of unintended consequences too. We can look at, people while they were at home during COVID started buying more gaming PCs, right? Like your graphics cards are more expensive now because they were like, "Oh, I need a work PC and I want to be able to game." So like we saw an uptick in gaming, right? Like there are going to be big costs to this, and if nations
Is
aren't,
that a big cost? Like I'm expecting you to give me something. If that like
that's awesome, bro.
gaming cards, video cards.
Queue times are gonna be down.
I also don't think that was the big driving
In a
factor behind
capitalist
that.
society, wouldn't that be a good thing to generate?
I think
more
as long as you
spending
have
in
like the infrastructure
economy?
and the companies are able to keep pace, yeah, sure, it wouldn't be a good thing. But as of right now, like, yeah, it was a big deal.
I think
It
there is
was
a point that
contributing
Dustin makes. I think there is a broader point that COVID, we saw a huge shift in terms of a decrease in demand for services and a massive uptick in demand for products. And as a result, we saw a lot of that was the result of a lot of inflation early on and supply chains getting lagged behind. Is that demand for one sector of the economy dropped off a cliff and demand for another sector spiked. That could be really harmful sometimes to an economy.
Yeah. But it's a weird example. Like a better example would have been like how when the people staying at home. I'm going to sneeze in a second. It's going to bother me. But that people staying people staying at home. There were a lot of them who were lonely, right? And so they went online. So they went to social media and they went on Facebook groups. And what did they find? They found conspiracy theories. They found that bleach is a cure-all. They found that COVID is whatever, something with the Jews. I don't know, right? They found a whole bunch of. It's always something with the Jews.
Yeah.
But they were lonely. They were looking for answers to whatever is ailing them, and they found it in Facebook groups, and that became a problem. But like the fact that I don't know, graphics cards are a bit more expensive, and again, I don't even think that's a driving factor. It's like.
Oh, it's definitely a contributing factor. Like,
Let me tell you what, probably that's my number one issue is GPU.
Obviously,
okay.
Obviously, crypto plays a part into it too. Like, there are a bunch of different combining
supply
factors.
chain issues. There were factory shutdowns. I mean, there's a myriad of issues that kind of came together at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And what I'm saying is, on a whole, if you're not scaled, if your production isn't going to be ready. This is like an infrastructure capitalist problem. I am on the idea with Flow and what Prime had just said, like, yeah, there are going to be social consequences to this that if we are not ready for, if we're not addressing now, is going to become a, incredibly alienating space. But I just think people on the whole end up searching for people that they can interact with face to face. Just pure on that kind of like species level that they do gravitate towards people.
Level.
Yeah. For being social creatures, right? Like humans are social creatures.
Okay.
Right. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. I guess finally I'm wondering about like the losses that the public is facing, right? Like, so everything has a cost. Literally everything has a cost. This new way of interacting with each other has a cost too. But of what we are losing is actually that big of a deal for the majority of individuals. And this is not like this is less of a remote work thing. Remote work is being driven by by workers, right? So the people who want it are the ones who are demanding it. To the point that I mean, there were articles about like CEOs,
quitting
right?
their jobs.
How saying that like we're gonna get these people back to work immediately. That that people who are doing remote work were inherently slacking off. That it was selfish to want to remote work. I think a lot. first of all, a lot of those guys changed once they saw like the bottom line, how much money they were saving on remote work, and then they're like, oh, maybe not. But others are just kind of old school and just like demanded that things stay the same. Like this is the way I always walk. I put on a suit and tie,
Hey, Freddie,
right? I hit my
Llamas
briefcase,
may very well be
and I go to
communists.
work, right? And if you don't
I
want to do
got
the same
questions.
thing, obviously there's something wrong with you. Again, which is where I'm afraid parts of this conversation we're going. But if there's such a demand, and there's so little, and there are a plethora of jobs, because that's another thing. Remote. I'm like working this out in my head as I'm talking, so I'm sorry if I'm going
Don't
on
worry.
tangents.
It's fine.
Don't worry.
That's another thing, because remote work. This is like a white collar problem. I should have brought this up before. This is like a white collar problem, right? This isn't most people who are working blue collar jobs, like they don't get that option, right? We saw this in COVID spikes, right? Who are the people getting COVID? They're the ones who were the was it the necessary workers, or the
Essential
Essential.
workers.
essential workers? Thank you so much. The essential workers. The essential workers were the ones spiking in COVID, because they didn't have a choice, right? You saw like a lot of African Americans. One, they were in that situation because of their jobs, but also because healthcare in their area was deficient, and they got hit really hard by COVID.
You mean subpar?
So the idea of
You said their healthcare was sufficient. I think you mean
I
subpar.
said insufficient.
Oh,
but,
okay, sorry.
maybe my thing cut out because it's been doing that. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. You're fine.
Yeah. So I'm going on a bit of a rant. I apologize. The fact that
Yeah, communists.
that was the case means that there's a class divide happening here, and these
Freddie,
complaints
you're
about
great.
like these now a series of options that end up helping a wide range of people, including disabled people. It's a weird conversation, right? Like I wonder like how this would sound to like a blue collar individual, right? A grocery store attendant, or other. That's the only one I can think of. Other essential workers, right? Who were like, I had to go out there every single day while you were in your home, right? While you were like ordering shit off Amazon and it being delivered. I was the one delivering it to you, right? I was being exposed to people again and again and again, and then to complain about like the benefits of remote work, it seems I'd imagine it would come off as classist to them.
No doubt, it's very much kind of like a first world problem type thing.
Right. Well, and not only that, like you would hope that you'd start to see some wage gains in those blue collar areas too, right? Like if we're going to start talking about how important that labor is going to be, it's need to be commensurate with that risk or that ability to actually do that instead of the manual labor of punching in keys on a keyboard. There's you would hope.
True.
Not in this country. Like, come on now.
Well, I mean, there
There should be, but you know,
there's some strong
there will
labor
be.
unions that are starting to get a little bit more like representation, right? Like the flight attendants union in the United States is a big contributor politically. They've got some good representation.
a lot of people in airlines still make dick, and like people working grocery
I don't
stores,
trust
which
them
there's
one
a
bit.
Grocers union. The grocers union is garbage. I mean, it's absolutely terrible. There are some bad unions out there, so like that's an issue, and that's the thing. Like, well, a lot of these larger companies will see the benefits, the underlying benefits of their gains
Right.
on these things. It when are we going to learn? It's not trickling down. Come on, like that's a joke. It's been a joke for 40 years. It's not happening.
I'm not trying to keep saying it. I just like you're gonna hope and have social consequences that result in like proper legislation. I look.
Wait for trickle down or wait for somebody to piss in your mouth. See which one happens first.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was really funny.
That's a good saying. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. But, okay, so yeah, it's you guys seem to be in agreement that there's a class divide, but how does that frame the rest of the argument for you, right? Like looking at it through that lens, we're looking at it through a lens. Before we've been talking about it through a lens of individuals who have a choice, right? But then looking at the scope of work when you don't have a choice, where uh, this is the job you're going to get, and how they tell you to interact with your work environment is how it's going to be. We live in a country where people don't have like guaranteed health insurance, and so for that reason, they don't leave their jobs,
Yeah.
right? So it's like I think that just alters how we should be interacting with this type of conversation.
I guess I can see I definitely can see the value of sort of taking a moment, taking a step back, and being like, look, one way or the other, white collar, like most people in white collar jobs are going to be a lot better off than most people in blue collar jobs, and I think that is valuable to have. But I'm actually I could just be missing it, but I'm not actually certain exactly how the fact that remote work is mostly a white collar phenomena would I'm not sure if that would necessarily change any of sort of my positions or any of the sort of points. I think it's important to acknowledge that this is ultimately a very sort of limited scope issue, and it's not the most important thing. You know, we shouldn't be legislating the country to the benefit of exclusively white collar workers. But I'm not sure if it really changes any of the sort of internal pieces.
And I want to
Just
push
quickly,
back on the.
just quickly before you do that, thank you, Redolent Thought, for the 5 hot 2 and gifts to this channel. Means a lot, does a lot. Thank you for being such a great supporter of this community, Redolent Thought.
So I want to push back a little bit on the idea that it's all white collar workers. I mean, somebody that works in a call center doing collections is making fucking dick shit for money. They're not getting
Yeah,
much.
I was gonna say that's me if you want to talk about it.
Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't exactly put them in like a white collar position. They're not accountants, or bankers or people who are working in speculative finance or some shit like that. They're people usually on the phones fucking beating the clock, getting screamed at 24/7, their entire shift, and then getting off and having to deal with the emotional ramifications of having been told they're a piece of shit for 8 hours a day, in and out. So it is the same. It is the same thing as somebody who is, say, working in a convenience store. I know because I've done both. So I'm speaking from experience. It is the same. The only difference is you don't have the tactile response. And yeah, you'd be surprised how much less people are willing to say when they're in your face as opposed to what they're willing to say to you on the phone.
Right. Oh yeah.
But they both carry their own issues, and I think people that are interacting, that are in jobs or in places where they have to interact with the public, where there isn't a choice, or they have to go into a workplace, sure, you should be compensated for that. I'm for compensating people as soon as they fucking walk out their door to drive to work. You're not fucking like on your free time during that time. You're driving to work. You should get paid for that. Just like if you have to go into work, you should get a stipend or extra pay for that as well. We're in a different society now, and a lot of jobs can be done from home, and those that can't should be compensated more for that work that they're doing.
I just want to throw in a quick thing. The other day, started laundry, lunch, put it in the dryer.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying, like, it's relevant. Like, that's just time savings. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's little things like that do save time and, like, not driving. Like, it adds up.
No, I mean, yeah, like if you're spending for most people, a third of your life, right, at work, right? So a third of your day goes there, a third of your life, overall, and then on top of that, it's the getting to there, right? And another reason to get rid of suburbs, which is where we were before, it's like if people driving 2 hours out, it'd just be better if people were there. I mean, for them personally, and then for the environment, it would just be better if we're more centralized in our sitting in urban planning, right? Our state planning, so that that's not an issue, and we live healthier lifestyles. Like, it would just make sense. Pause. Hello, hi. Thanks for joining us. Did you want to say something?
G'day, mate. Yeah, look, I was just on the point
Hey,
you were
son,
making,
how you doing,
PrimeCayes,
man?
that this income inequality, yeah, I get that not everybody who can work remotely is necessarily poor, but the overarching picture that we've got out of this pandemic has been increasing wealth inequality, and this is one of the side effects of that happening. And I wanted to talk about how that intersects with climate change, because we're increasingly seeing communities get destroyed and people have to get back on their feet time and time again. And in some ways, remote work can help with that, but only if you've made it past a certain threshold of having enough tech to be able to engage. Some of that can be done by government. Some of it can be done by corporations who hand you a computer. But to assume that's always going to be the case is probably unrealistic.
I'm liking
So
the
unless
shoe
we
on
put
head.
some strong social controls
Fuck
in,
yeah.
we could be pricing
I like the
people
sense
out of
justice
work
too. That's
completely over time. And this could become a self-reinforcing cycle. So I think that there's, in addition to the inherent kind of wealth inequality that this, from a white collar perspective, it also has a feedback loop capability of allowing people who are already rich to live in places that are cheaper while forcing poor people to live in places that cost more, while allowing people who already have tech to get tech jobs while cutting people who don't have tech out of those tech jobs, and essentially just diverging these class stratifications that we're already seeing. There are a few exceptions, as was raised earlier, but by and large, we are seeing this phenomena overwhelmingly benefit those people who are rich enough to have a spare room that they could, dedicate to this, who are rich enough to have the tech and live in those places that have the stuff that Red Bearded Man was talking about, Dustin, that this is a class stratification, and it's not just about the jobs. It is also about the prerequisites and the feedback loops.
Yeah.
Does anyone respond to that?
I think we mostly all agree, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. But I guess I'll try to comment on that sort of briefly. I think, yes, there's a level. There's levels to this shit, right? Like there was who someone said it previously. It was something I wanted to comment on. That like remote work. I think it was Kamikaze. Yeah, it was Kamikaze before. That remote work will give the private sector a reason to build out broadband, and I hated it because it's probably true. I hated it because it's the digital divide as it stands. That so many of us like don't have access to well, not of us. If you didn't, then you want to be watching this. But
I don't know how true that would actually be. As a matter of fact, Prime, that this will give
what?
as far as like giving private industry a reason to expand broadband, I don't know how much that's actually true.
Well, okay,
and that
well, maybe. Let me finish my point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think that that we have at least in this nation, and maybe different in others, right? That we don't realize that the internet's utility, and that everyone should have access to it, and that if you don't, you are locked out of not only job opportunities but culture, right? History as it's being made. There's so much of what's happening in the world that you will literally not be able to access if you don't have this. And then, of course, yeah, it's the training, right? Your kids not being able to fully engage even in their own education, because education assumes that you have access to the internet, like broadband access. So where they go to a McDonald's parking lot to use the Wi-Fi there, which is like a huge fucking thing in case you didn't know. So
Yep.
It seems to me, and Dustin is disagreeing. It seems to me that this would be that the fact that there's a business demand and businesses would be complaining that their employees don't have proper broadband access would be a more of a reason for any sort of change to happen, rather than that people have been suffering for like 2 decades now.
Are we talking about nationalizing broadband service? Because I'm all fucking for that
Fuck
shit. Let's
yeah.
fucking go
High five,
right
my man.
fucking now.
So the reason why I disagree with you,
Numtots,
Glenn,
go.
is kind of what I was talking about with that concentration of economic opportunity and power, right? Because as of right now, the world that we live in, a lot of people seem to just go to a large city and they live there, and we've got like a huge rural and city divide as of right now. So that's why I like this idea of remote work, but it needs to be, in my mind, it needs to be done in consultation with governance in a way so we can start saying like, hey, there's a reason why you should go live out in rural fucking Montana, right? There are some positives out there, and we're going to ensure that the infrastructure is out there. The reason why I brought this up, as far as like me disagreeing, there doesn't seem to be a lot of benefit. And we know that private companies usually don't want to make those type of large investments because they don't see a lot of benefit because of that, right? Like there'd be no benefit. They just want to ensure that they've got the highest quality in the most concentrated area because it lessens their responsibilities and they've got to hire less people. It has to be a government move, and we've kind of see that. I think it was a huge... I think it was the American Recovery Act signed in by Biden that had, at least here in Nebraska, gave like something like $117 million to help get broadband out to rural Nebraska. Like there are big reasons that huge shifts like this have to be, the groundwork at the very least has to be laid by the government, because it doesn't look like the private industry is willing to take that risk.
Certainly in terms of the last mile, we just had that exact thing happen in Australia because we upgraded the entire national network to get NBN, and we'd had a left-wing government who offered to pay for it all and go do the last mile to everybody's houses, and then we had a right-wing government who came in and said no, it has to produce a profit, and so the company they put in charge of that just stopped going to rural areas. And I think that's probably what you'd see if there was an incentive to companies to roll out. The incentive would not be for high density urban areas and those who already had to the areas that had high degrees of skilled workers. So again, we would see that income disparity reinforced through that process. And large parts of the country just wouldn't be profitable for them to roll it out to, either because it took too long or didn't have the people that are interested in it.
Which is why it has to be a utility, because if you rely, is exactly why the post office is the utility, right? Delivering mail, because there's some places where delivering mail is simply not profitable. That's why FedEx and them don't go that far here in the States. Because it's not worth their time. If you left it up to them, those people would just not get mail, right? And now this is the same thing with email. This is the same thing with broadband. It's not profitable enough. Okay, well then let's put a massive investment. First of all, you can have maybe a public option, if not straight up nationalization, like my man Jason Society wants, right? At the very least, have a public option, or like. The other option is massive public investment into these private companies to build out these networks. The last mile, but we hate that the most. But that's
the worst of all worlds.
I think it's it's also really important to recognize that I think it's not just also a matter of rural areas, but I think even there are a lot of like more sort of rundown suburban areas. I don't know if you guys have ever been in or heard of school districts that will try to run like Wi-Fi trucks out to like more disadvantaged communities, because there will be kids who are getting assigned homework and their houses just straight up do not have any cables running there already. If you ever buy a house that previously didn't have internet, or if the line gets broken, a lot of times you have to like pay for half of that if the company's going to go and run a new line, and that can be like thousands of dollars depending upon like where you are, what the regulations are, or how far away you are. It just seems undeniable at this point that internet is as required, if not more required, than like electricity to function like as a utility in a lot of places.
I actually think that school example is a really good one, because it kind of gives an insight into what would happen if we forced everyone in society to go remote. Because we took an entire generation and we said, nah, all of you, you're now remote. And a few people did well. They got more time to do exercise, spent more time with their family. Some of the kids did okay. But overwhelmingly, we saw huge societal issues, people who were struggling with socialization, not being around other people. And we saw those who were the most disadvantaged just drop off the map completely and lose entire years of their lives and get left out of progression systems. That seems to be a fairly good indication of what we'd see if this became the norm across all of society.
Um, so this is super interesting. We've been at this for over 8 hours. Thank you all for being here. Everyone who showed up. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be on YouTube. We'll be doing some gaming. So come join us at YouTube. Right, hit that follow button. If you haven't done so yet, hit that follow button. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. But also keep track of what we're doing. Head up us on Discord. Discord has our announcements and tells you whenever I'm going live. So if you're confused about that, check out Discord. And YouTube is where you'll find, well, me tomorrow, and also the VODs in case you missed anything there, right? Head us up on Twitter as well. I am going to raid one of our kind supporters. That would be Jason Society, right, Jason? Take this raid. I'm not actually asking for your permission. I'm just going to give it to you, right? You're just going to take it. Right?
Give me all your raid.
And we'll talk to you in the future. Bye.
Thank you, Case.
Yeah.